Tell about the birth of your first child, and after that, then about each of the others.
Well, the first one was Giovanni. We were married in 1936, and 11 months after here he came. He was a type of a child that was always venturesome and wanted to get into and know and do about everything that come along, and he hasn't changed. He's still, even to this day, he likes to be involved in something different, something new, and if it don't fit, he jumps to the next one. And that's the way Giovanni's been. And but he was my father's first grandchild. They because I think the name we gave him fit right in with the family, because my great-great-grandfather got the name of Giovanni. My great-grandfather had that same name, and my grandfather, my father, and myself, and my son and my grandson all have the same name. And it's kind of a family tradition to do that. I was kidding little Giovanni today. I said, you better hurry up if you're going to fit in another 4-generation picture like we got. We have one of Giovanni, of me and Grandpa Favero and me and Giovanni and little Giovanni. But I think, as far as I know, that's the only one in the family, is that 4-generation picture. And about 5 years later, we began to think we wasn't going to get any more, and here come Raj sneaking along. I had started to work in the railroad in 1941, and in 45 I think Raj was born. But I was up at the railroad. I left home, and I said to Melbourne, I said, now you call me if you need me. And I had a cousin working the railroad by the name of Bob Barr, and he happened to be the chief clerk on that particular night, afternoon. I was working that shift on afternoons, and I'd got to work, and I hadn't been there about an hour and a half, and all of a sudden I heard somebody come running across the yard hollering, John, John, Giovanni, John. I said, what's the matter? He says, get the hell out of here and get to the hospital. Your wife's up there having a baby. I said, what? I just left. She was okay. Well, she's on her way. So I said, well, what about my job? He says, get out of here. I'll take care of your job. And it was pretty near 48 hours before Raj got here after that. So I missed 2 days' work. But he was a payday boy. He was born on the 25th of the month, and that was payday. We always called him our payday kid.
How did she get to the hospital?
Well, about 4 or 5 years later, and it was funny, we never wished it that way, but that's where our kids were born. About four or five, I think, 3 years, Bob came along, and he was always a little fat, cuddly guy, and yeah, I used to get a kick out of getting him on the rug in the front room of that old house, tickle him, and he would laugh for hours. And after he began to grow up, Giovanni and Raj was mad at him all the time, because if I left him home, they gave him a bad time. So every time I'd go to get chicken feed for the chickens or to go anywhere, I'd take him with me to protect him so he wouldn't get hammered.
Yeah, that's true.
And if they stayed there, they used to have a little thing. We had a lot of chickens, about 500 of them at the time, and sooner than clean the eggs, it was dirty, they'd go in the barn and have an egg fight. Finally, one day I caught up with them and found eggs all over the end of the barn. Found out what they was doing. There was no more egg fights after that. But it was quite a while, and we thought there was no girls in view for us, so here comes Sheila. And she fit right in. We needed that change. We'd been putting up with boys about long enough, and we got a little girl, and everything was changed then. The view was different, everything was different. So the boys got a big kick out of it to think they had a little sister. But it went along quite a few, well, it was a thing happened to Sheila. I went to work. She'd had a cold real bad one night when I went to work, and we were really worried about her. She was in bad shape. And I said to Melba, I said, now you watch her. If her fingernails go black, go dark, you call me immediately. And this is telling how close she come to not being here. But she called me, so I called the doc and told him. And he says, where is she at? And I said, she's home. And he said, where are you? I said, the railroad. And so I called Melba and I said, you get her up, doctor, I forget the name of the doctor, he was out at the terrace. He says, you get her to the hospital just as fast as you can get her there. And so the doctor met her up at Nice Corner and took her and Sheila right to the hospital. But there was something that happened before that. During that summer, Raj and Giovanni were riding horses with Tom from our place over to Tom's, and they got right along there by Thelma Green's and Carl Green's, and something spooked the horses, and Raj was riding on the back of the horse. It was Giovanni. And as the horses started up, it threw Raj off the horse, and he lit on the hard road on the back of his head, put him out, and he was out for 4 days. And it was during that time that we was paying all the attention to getting Raj back on his feet that Sheila got this pneumonia. So we just got Raj out of the hospital 3 days, and we had Sheila back in. And we almost lost her. We were just lucky we didn't. But as things went along, and quite a few changes come along, and during that time, Bob was out in the pasture with Beauty C and the mare we had out there, posse, and they're riding her for train for posse. And Melba was looking out the old kitchen window, and she seen him sitting there out on the ground, and the horse standing there looking down at him. And she went out, "What's the matter, Bob?" He says, "Come and help me, I broke my leg." She said, "Oh, you're just kidding me." She went back in the house. She looked back out there, and he was still sitting there, the horse looking down at him. So when she found out what was wrong, she loaded him in the car and took him up to the doctor and put a thing on his leg and set his leg, and he was a good boy for quite a while after that, for about a month or better, before he could walk again. But Sheila got to be about 4 years old by that time, and she was bugging Melba all the time. "I need a little sister. I need a little sister. We don't have. I got 3 boys and me." I know she wasn't happy with that at all. So all of a sudden, as things changed, and here come Laurie, and that did 2 things. That made the caboose and it gave Sheila a partner, and that pretty well balanced our family out. We had 3 boys and 2 girls. We had all the kinds there was and enough of them. So, but that's kind of the way our kids come along. And they're all still here.
Tell about your civic or political activities.
Well, to start with, I'm neither Democrat or Republican. I believe in the guy who's going to do the job. I'll give him my vote. I don't care what party he belongs to. If I think a man is the type of man that we need to do the job, he gets my support. And as far as civic activities, if I could be of help to anybody or anything or anywhere, I would do that. but I never pushed myself in to cause anybody any problems or make it tough on anybody. If I was asked to do a job in a church, I did it, which I never got to ask. The only job that I really had that was really enjoyable was when I was given the job of explorer leader. And I had that, I guess, about 6-7 years. And I took that many groups of kids into the UNIS every year in an old red truck that I still got. And I think Bob went with us the last year, didn't you?
I went up 1 year, yeah.
1 year, yeah. Giovanni finally got to go a year, but he'd been working and he could never break loose, but finally he came up and went. But Roger was the one who got the benefit of that. But we went up in those UNIS and had a great time, a lot of times. And
I'm going to say Red Cross was polio? March of Dimes, yeah.
yeah, we were involved in the March of Dimes, Melba and I, and spent quite a bit of time with that for about 4 or 5 years. And we had some nice trips out of it. We was involved in getting a lot of money into that organization. We made several trips, a couple to Sacramento or San Francisco, one to Reno, and with that group. There was some people from the bank, and
What was Mom's position in that? Was she
was the chairman of this area out here.
organized the campaign to collect the money? I know we used to go up into the valley.
Yeah, and she because she was of the county, because she was chairman of the group, she had to do that. And we quite a few times we had $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 in our possession that had to go into that outfit. They had to be turned into them. But it's surprising how many people donate to those things that you would think never do. But we used to get involved in a lot of good things and do them.
Okay. What do you remember about yourself as a teenager? What was important to you, like your dreams and your goals?
Do that again.
What do you remember about yourself as a teenager? What was important to you?
Well, one of the things that always was prevalent is my dad seen that I had plenty of work to do. I didn't have much time to get into mischief. And all of our entertainment or things we done was done within the neighborhood, within the ward, within the county. And we had to do our own organization of ball and did a few nice things in school. I was won a few essay contests, and I was always involved in spelling contests. And to this day, spelling and stuff like that doesn't bother me. I was fortunate enough to be involved in school when phonics was in full bloom. And when they took it away for a while, thought they could get by with it like they'd been doing with a few other things. It didn't work. But as a teenager, I remember we had a band, a bunch of us, about 15 of us, when we were around 12, 15, 14, up 16-year-old. And we used to play mandolins, guitars, and whatever. And we used to go around all the wards and play. There was me and Mel Peterson and George Wendell, Earl Staker, all those old guys my age. And I was trying to think of the name the other day, what they called us. It was a band like the old songs of the South. We used to sing a lot of those and do a lot of those, play a lot of those. But I used to play the steel guitar, Jim played the mandolin, different things. One guy played not a saxophone, but an accordion, and we had several good guitars, steel and wine. I played mostly steel guitar. We used to have a lot of fun doing that. Used to have ball. We didn't have inter-school ball teams, but we would, the school kids would organize and we would play against us. We were Gainesville, whatever. Used to play a lot of ball. I used to pitch quite a bit. I was left-handed. And they didn't like me because I was left-handed.
Okay, this one says, describe your first crush. What was she like? And
Now, have you know I didn't belong to that organization?
well, I don't know, it just says he or she, right? But and then why don't you tell us about mother, meeting mother, and I mean, not that she was your first crush. You can tell us about that too, but then tell us about mother and how you met her and that courtship.
Well, when we was in school down at the Taylor School, the boys didn't mix up with the girls. That was something that they didn't. She shied away from the girls at that age up until I got about 8th or 9th grade. You had those you liked, but you kept that yourself if you're smart. But the Taylor girls could never figure out why us Taylor boys didn't like to go with them, didn't like to date them. Well, when you get to know some of them as well as we knew them, there was others more tempting on the outside. But when we got into high school, there was several girls that I went with. One of the first girls I got mixed up with and dated in my sophomore year was a girl from Roy called June Shepherd. Real blondie. About your blonde. Even lighter than yours. She's a little bigger than you, a little chubbier, but she was a real nice girl. But we dated quite a little bit. Not that you're not a girl, you're not a nice girl. Remember that, you are. But dated her some, and in the meantime, about second year in high school, and when fall came, Hy Peterson used to raise turkeys. And he needed a lot of help to dress them in the fall of the year when they were killing them for Thanksgiving. So Jim and I and a bunch of the boys went over there to work. Well, Lyman Hunter down here and his wife come over to work too. And they brought a couple of girls over there with them. And they were good-looking girls. They were... One was a blonde and one was a brunette. Anyway, as things went on, we worked there for 2-3 days, and we used to call that Hunter Fat Hunter. So Mel says, "Hey, Fat Hunter, why don't you get us a date with those girls?" I said, "Yeah, do it." So one night he said, "Why don't you guys meet me over at my house?" They were staying with him. They were relations to his and Mildred's. And they were staying there while I was working at the turkey farm. So we took him on, and we went over there, and he brought him out. When Mel said, he says, "I get the blonde." I said, "I don't care, whatever." So when Lyman brought him out, the blondie crawled in the front seat with him, and the other one in the back seat with me. Well, we was in Mel Peterson's dad's Hudson. We didn't know what to do, so we decided that we better find something to do to entertain him for the evening. So Mel says, "Well, let's take him up and take him to the sugar factory. Let him see what the sugar factory's like." So,
You know where the sugar factory is? It's up here on 1900, just across the street from Pete's Cafe. Back in the
it
50s.
used to be a great big sugar factory there in full bloom, then running. So we went up there and went through the sugar factory, and I could tell they were bored by the way, because they wasn't too interested in looking at the sugar factory. So we decided to take them up to the forest and get them an ice cream. So when we went up, and so I guess we became the talk of the country, because the next time we was over to clean turkeys, there was giggling and laughing and giggling and laughing. But anyway, Mel said, when we took him home, he said, "Boy, that blonde didn't even impressed me. She never this, that, and the other. I was sitting in the back seat, and Melba sat over close to me, and everything worked out. Before we got home, she gave me a good kiss, and I thought, wow. so shortly after that, when we was over to doing turkeys again, she came over and was talking to me. Well, I made another date with her. Didn't say anything to Mel. And then, so anyway, that's where it started. On High Peterson's turkey. But we started going together, and I quit dating girls at Weber High. There was several of them I'd been dating. And the girls at Weber High said, huh, you don't think us Weber High girls are any good. How come you're going with Ogden City girls? Never mind, that's my choice. But I used to take her out there at the dances all the time. And they couldn't understand that, why I'd take her. But we went together 3 years, Melba and I, before we decided to get married.
So you were how old when you met Mother?
21.
You were 21? And she was how old?
18.
18. When you got married though, right? How old were you? So when you were 17, 18? And she was...
18. When we started going together, I was 18.
Oh, when you started going together? Yeah.
Did you date 3 years before you were married then?
Said, yeah.
And when we got married, we were the only, there was nobody in our family that was eligible to go to the temple with us except Lloyd, Hunter, and Grace. And Grace, to the day she died, said, I've never had such a wild ride in the back of a Ford car as that one when we went down to the temple that morning to get married. When we went to pick them up, they weren't quite ready and we were a little bit late. And I burnt the road up all the way down. And I swear she wet her pants.
Well, before we go on to the next question. Huh? Oh, okay. Oh, well, I'm not going to. Where does Opal Hammer fit in? I thought you dated her once.
I dated her when I was secretary of the Mutual, only in the fact that I used to take her to the Mutual parties with me, and up to the meetings, I'd pick her up and take her to the meetings, but she was hot on my trail. And I used to kick up an awful lot of dust to keep her from catching up with me. She was a nice girl, but she didn't seem to fit into my program.
She didn't kiss as good as Mom, huh?
Huh?
She didn't kiss as good as Mom?
I never kissed her.
Oh.
I didn't want to get in trouble. Well, if you want to get in trouble, just kiss the lady. I did.
Okay, Kathy.
Maybe that's the answer to this question. What convinced you most in your choice of a spouse?
She was always easy to get along with. And when we first went together, she was always the life of the party wherever we went. She was always up and coming, going, doing things. And I liked that because I like to be the same way. But she was a person that never let any grass grow under her feet. She was always progressive and moving, and that was good. And it's carried over to the family.
Okay. Tell about how, when, and where you learned to drive.
In 1918, my dad bought a Model T Ford with the curtains on the side, and we drove that until 1930 or 31, and that's what we traveled in. And my dad tried his best to get your mother to teach her to drive. And one day, one Labor Day, we went down to Hooper, and we was on our way home. He convinced her to drive that Ford home. And the Green boy was bringing these cows past Dallas Greens and over to where he lived there across from Idle Greens down here. and we got about halfway between there, and one of those old Holstein cows stepped out in front of her, and she didn't know how to put the brake on. Right in the butt of that old cow, and pushed the radiator in, and that ended her driving. But anyway, we drove that old Ford until my Uncle Mike bought a brand new Hudson. Hy Peterson bought a new Hudson. My dad bought a brand new Essex. So that's when we learned how to drive. We started driving that old Model T Ford when I was about 14 or 15-year-old. Jim and I used to drive that all over. We drive it uptown, and we always was $1 short and no gas. And when we got gas in the tank, we always had it down to the last 2 inches. So one day we was going uptown, up the old 33rd Street when it was all dirt road. And coming home, we got about halfway up that hill, and the old bugger stopped on us. And we knew what had happened because the gas tank was underneath the seat. And when you're going uphill, the gas would all run back down here, and it wouldn't run up, and it was gravity feed. You know what we had to do to get that old bugger home? We had to push it around backwards and back up the hill, and then drive on home.
Have a driver's license?
Huh? I never got a driver's license till 1933.
You
Didn't have to have one.
How old did you have to be? Before you could get one, did it matter?
When they put that into law, anybody who was going to drive a car better have a driver's license in 1933. I had that license for years. I don't know where it ever went. But that's the first, and that was good. When you once got one, it was good for until they changed the law, and you had to get them every so often, every 5 years. But I had that license, that 1933 license, for 10 or 12 years.
So when they put that law into effect in 1933, did they have to be 16 then to drive?
They didn't specify an age. If you was going to drive, you better go get a license. Had to have a license. You got caught driving a car without one, they'd throw the book at you.
Regardless of the age then?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Describe your first paying job. What was your salary, your duties, and what was your boss like?
Well, the first paying job I ever had of any kind was hauling hay for the neighbors in the summertime. And you got 2.5 a day in your dinner. And you went there at 8 o'clock and you stayed there till 6 o'clock at night. Worked your butt off. That's the first paying job we had. We used to go do work for the neighbors, picking up potatoes, hauling hay, whatever. And then after that, during the winter, I went to work for Safeways in their grocery store on Washington Avenue. I'd go up there and work on Saturdays. And Jim went to work for Penny's in the store there, and I went over to work for Safeways. Worked for a couple of winters or so on Saturdays and sometime on Wednesdays. But I remember them making hamburger. They used to trim all the trimmings off of the beef and throw it in a great big old wash tub and add about 3 buckets of water to it and mix it and throw it in the counter. They used to have downstairs in that place, used to bring them in the back, they'd have big blocks of cheese about twice as big as that thing. They'd come in and wrap cheese, they'd buy it that way, and we used to have to go down and cut that cheese and get it ready and bring it up and cut it in pound and 2-pound blocks. You didn't buy it like you do now wrapped. It used to be delivered to the stores in great big things. But after I worked there for a while, when I got out of school, or towards the last, just before I was married, I went to work for some of the contractors. I helped build Pine View Dam. I helped build the Highline Canal around from the dam around Brigham City. I worked on that. But I just went from one thing to the other. During the Depression, I went to work for the WPA. But I went to work not as a laborer, I went there as a blacksmith. First blacksmith helper for a year, then I worked for several years as a blacksmith. and I got so I could do about anything with a fire, and that paid us enough to get along. And Melba worked odd jobs and did things to help us, and she was always cooperative and ready to see that she done her share to make the family good along. But that the first winter we was married, I might tell you this. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any, and I happened to run across a guy who made horseradish and put it in little bottles. And his name was Donna's Pride. The horseradish, and they don't have it anymore. He's not. But he found out that I got the information that he needed horseradish roots. And down on the old place down here, just north of the house, clear over almost to Carl's, there was bushels of that horseradish root. Well, I went out there in the wintertime and I'd get $40 of gunny sack for that horseradish. And about any time we get a little low on money, I'd dig him a bag of horseradish and take it up. That's how we got by the first winter or two. And we had one cow. We used to milk that one cow. Finally, I got busy, and I found a guy that wanted rabbits. Wanted breast rabbits. So I got about 8 or 10 doe rabbits in that old barn, and I lined them up, and they'd have babies, and I'd put them on the big pen and grow them up to a certain size that he wanted, and I'd kill them and take them into him. Done any kind of thing to make a buck. I tell you, it was tough doing that depression, and I was right. That was when we was married, right in the middle of depression. So.
This one says, tell about your religion practiced in your home when you were still living at home. Any faith-promoting stories?
Do that a little louder.
Tell about religion, how it was practiced in your home when you were still living at home. And any faith-promoting stories that you can remember?
Well, when I was born, my mother was the only member of the church. My dad wasn't a member of the church, so I wasn't born into the gospel, under the covenant or anything. I was just born because my father was Catholic, and so I got into the church by being baptized in, just like anybody else who might become a member. And all of my brothers, basically, they were all our family was born before my dad finally joined the church and was baptized in the church and joined the church. So all of our kids that were baptized in the church, basically, except the last one or two, was. But as far as my dad believed in right was right and wrong was wrong, and you better adhere to those things and understand them and live that way. But he always supported my mother and seen that we got to church, and that we had the blessing on the food. And you can give my mother credit for that because. But my grandfather Favero used to say a blessing on his food, even he was Catholic. So religion was basically a major issue in our family.
Are you saying issue like was it a problem, or was it just kind of?
My mother never made it a problem. She never pushed the church onto my dad. She let him see what was going on, see how the kids responded, see what we did. And finally he said one time, he says, well, he says, if I don't, I got to join him or I'm going to get left out. He knew enough about the gospel and the covenants and everything, and he realized that it was time to get in. But there was never, the only issue in our family about the gospel was my dad's brothers and his family. They couldn't understand why he would. My dad always said, I'll never join the church as long as my mother and dad's alive. I won't dishonor them. But when it come time, he did.
Dad, tell us about the time that Grandpa, when the chapel was being built.
Well, my dad used to go to church with my mother, and just before they were married, or when they were getting married, he went to Bishop Jardine, and the people who was in charge of the church then, and he asked to be a member of the church, and wanted to do what had to be done because he knew enough about it. And they said, well, you haven't been around long enough and you don't know enough about the church. We can't honor that this time. You'll have to spend some more time. And he said, hey, I'll do this thing on my own time then. And he never, but anyway, when they was building the new chapel down there, they had it built, and they was paying for it on the pay plan and trying to get it paid for, and so the bishop got up and made a plea to the people, and Heber Hawks also. I remember both of them talking about it, and so my dad, here Johnny, here, and he took a $50 bill out, and he says, here, take this up and give it to the bishop. Well, I was only about 4 or 5 years, 6 years old, something like 5 years old, little kid. And I took that and I would give it to the bishop, and he made an issue of it, and they got all the money they needed in a hurry. Because he set that example, not being a member. And they got busy and got the money, got the church done. But I remember that as a kid.
Okay, who's next?
Do you mind?
We gotta go back to this.
How did you become engaged when you asked Mom to marry you? How did you get engaged?
You won't believe this. But I had went and picked out a ring, and I packed it around for a couple of 3 weeks. So one day, Melba and I went and picked her up from work. And my Uncle Mike had a saloon down on 25th Street. And so we had talked about getting married and getting engaged and this and that and the other. So I picked Melba up and I said, let's run down and see if the folks are down to Uncle Mike's saloon. So I had a ring in my pocket then, so we went down there. Sure enough, they were there visiting with Uncle Mike. They would go in there when they get groceries and stop in and talk to him. So we went in and sat down to one of the tables and was visiting with him and talking. And Mike was there talking. And I pulled this thing out of my pocket and I looked at Melba and I said, give me your hand. So she said, what do you want? So I slipped this ring on her. She says, I don't believe this. She says, she jumped up and gave me a big hug. And that was it.
So you didn't really even say, will you marry me?
No. We had talked about that. We had that all planned. I'd asked her before that. But I said, I'll have to get you a ring before we announce this.
So did you ever ask her dad or mother? Or did they just not do that in those days?
There wasn't much of that went on. They knew what we intended to do, and they just took it for granted. And they was glad to get me because I was a little different than what they'd been putting up with in their life. And Melba and I were the first ones in their family to ever get married in the church, the first ones in my family to go to the temple. Very first. In fact, I was the first one, as far as I can remember and know, I was the first member, first one of the Favero family to be a member of the church.
Yeah, that's probably true.
As far as I can remember.
Okay.
What is a favorite family place to go with your wife and kids?
Home. Home was the place. Secondary was church. We always enjoyed being home. And then other than that, we spent most of our time in church. Giovanni, we raised Giovanni and Raj on the church benches. Poor little buggers, we'd take them down in Mutual, and she'd lay them on the bench there, and they'd go to sleep while we was doing the Mutual work. But we spent a lot of years in Mutual. But we took a few nice trips as the kids grew up. We didn't start to doing that until, well, we made a couple of nice trips with Giovanni. But after he got married, then we made it. I think we went up into the Northwest. Was Giovanni with us then? I think he was.
Yeah.
You went to the Northwest. Went all up through Washington, Oregon, all through that area. But after Giovanni got married, then it was just the rest of us we would go. We did make a trip to down Los Angeles and San Diego, didn't we? When all of them was, but we did a few nice trips.
I remember the trip we took to, I think it was San Francisco, and Rod and Giovanni broke the chair.
That's when we went down on the train. And we had to pay for the chair, and then finally one of the guys told me, he says, well, you aren't the first guy that paid for that chair. That chair has been paid for 2-3 times. They had rigged it, had it rigged.
Yeah, we come down to check out, and they jerked the bag, hit them behind the counter, and said, you got to pay for the chair that you broke. And Dad didn't know anything about it. Roger and Giovanni did. And so then Dad had to pay, what was it, $40, something like that?
40 or $50.
That was a lot of money for a chair. Yeah, and so then come to find out maybe it wasn't all that their fault after all. But, boy, talking about a scary few minutes, you know. We thought we're all going to jail.
Now San Francisco that you
That was in
went?
San Francisco. We rode the train down, rode the train back, and taxis. So.
But we always supported our kids in the 4-H stuff. We always supported them in the 4-H or any church work they had to do, or any of that sort of thing. We always supported them in that.
Okay. What do you want to do? You want to take a break? Tony's on the phone. He wants to tell him happy birthday.
Oh.
Kind of keep it short.
He said he'd be quick. He knows what we're doing.
Everybody sit down.
1 second.
Go ahead, everybody on the air.
No? Quiet on the set.
Okay. Describe your first home or apartment as a young couple.
Well, our first home, when we was first married, we stayed with Grandpa and Grandma for a few nights and a few weeks till we got the old house down there by the church fixed up and got it cleaned up and got all the crap out of it and got it straightened around, and we lived down there for about 6 years, 7 years, didn't we? Maybe 8.
Maybe.
8 years down there by the old house down there. That's where we lived. But we never rented an apartment or lived in an apartment anywhere, ever. And that didn't please Grandma Priest too much. She says, why don't you guys move to town and live in town like white people do? I didn't know I was a nigger or somebody else, but she implicated that we should live in town. But in later years, as our family grew up, Mother said, I'm sure glad we stayed out here to raise our kids. It's the best place in the world to raise them. So that's where they grew up. But then we come up here where we live now and built a little house, and up there in the place we live now, and lived in that for, I guess, 20, 30 years, didn't we? 20 years. And that was the second house, and we was going to build a house right in front of that. When finally we got smart and built the one we did down where we did, and that was a good thing.
Let's see, you moved up, you moved into the old house probably in about 1945 or 46, right?
Yeah.
We got
About 47.
No, 1947, about then, yeah.
And then you built a new house in 1963 or 4.
63 and moved into it in 64. That's the end of it. That's where we've been.
Okay.
So how many kids did you have in the very first house?
In the very first house, 3 of them, all the boys,
But where did you live when Giovanni was born?
in that little old house down by the church.
Okay, and then Giovanni and Bob, or Raj and Bob were
We're
both,
all born.
3 of the boys were born in the little old house.
Yep, yep,
And then Sheila and I were both born in the cinder block castle.
yep.
Grandpa, who built that first house that you lived in?
I did. Me and Melba's dad.
No. The first house.
No, the first house was my grandpa Daly's home.
Did he build that originally?
No, his half brother by the name of Brown built that. He lived over where Carl lives, and that's where he lived. Then he bought the place from Brown, and he moved over there and lived in that house. And then after he died, he moved back in the old house and let my uncle live in that house, and he died, so my dad bought that property, and when he bought that property, then when I got married, we moved in there and lived in there. And I earned every day of it. I had to work my butt off. I didn't pay rent, but I certainly had to work my butt off for the privilege of living there. I used to run that place for him practically all the time. The rest of the kids weren't big enough to do it, and I couldn't get much help out of Jim, but we got it done anyway.
Okay. Who's got some other questions?
You going to mine now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Describe a favorite vacation in your married years.
The best vacations that we had was when we had our kids and all our family with us, and could take them and enjoy them and be together. We made one trip up to Yellowstone when just Bob and Giovanni and Raj were little. I'll never forget that trip. Giovanni and I one morning when we was up there in Melba, and the 2 little kids were in the cabin that we had there, and Giovanni and I decided to take a ride up to the north end of Yellowstone. So as we was riding up, we come across a place there where there was a little swamp. And there was a little calf, a little moose calf laying beside the road. Giovanni says, "Stop, Daddy, stop, let me get out and pet it." So he got out, and that calf jumped up and started to bellowing and running. All of a sudden that swamp came alive, and here came a big old moose cow out, and I said, "Run, Giovanni, get in the car quick." She followed us for a quarter of a mile down that road trying to get us. And he was always getting us in some kind of trouble, and that was one of them. And that's the kind of vacations we used to have with these guys. They, just like the chair in San Francisco, these 3 guys got us in trouble.
No, I was too little to do that. It was the bigger kids.
Nevertheless, it cost me $54.
Okay.
Dad, ask him about like the Caribbean and the Virgin Islands.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What family vacations have you taken, Dad? Like,
Well, we went to Yellowstone. We went to Sacramento. We went to San Francisco. We went up to the Northwest when the kids were all young. But vacations after that, we had a nice trip to the Caribbean. We had a trip to, when Raj got off from his mission, we had a trip and went all through Central Europe. And when Bob got released, you know about that, you went with us. We went all down the east coast of South America. Had a good trip then. Those are the kind of trips you remember. And those were all good trips. Whenever the family is involved, trips are good. But Melba and I did take a few nice trips otherwise. And then our mission was an outstanding one. That was just like a trip because we did some nice things there.
Where were you and what were you doing the day the first band landed on the
I was working at the railroad midnights, and I was working at Sears days, working my butt off trying to keep my family afloat, keep Raj on his mission. Or Bob.
Later. It'd be quite a bit later.
Bob.
That would have been about, what year did you say?
69.
69. I'd have been home then. 69. I was married then.
Yeah, well, anyway, I was working 2 jobs trying to keep everything going.
Trying to keep Bob going.
That's right, trying to keep it going. Well, he was pretty right about working 2 jobs because he always worked 2 jobs.
Sometimes 3. Well, I actually had 3 jobs. One at the railroad, one at Sears, and run the damn farm to boot, so I had 3 jobs.
Are there any other questions? What's yours?
What were your fears, expectations, anticipations about getting married?
No fears about it. I loved it. I was enjoying it. I could have gone on and courted Melba for a long time, but she got a little bit out of patience. Said, if we're going to get married, we better do it. So we did. She didn't know I'd been packing a ring around my pocket for about 2 months.
What was your wedding like? Did you have like a reception and the whole deal, or what was that like?
Our wedding was one of the nicest weddings it was ever.
Where did you have your reception?
We had it at the Utah Power and Light Auditorium on Washington Avenue. It was the first place in Ogden to have air conditioning, and we were one of the first people to have a party in there.
You got married in June.
We got married in June. It was hot that June. It was 90 and 100 and on up to 103 or 4 degrees that year. Right in June it was up to 100.
Where was the place? On Washington?
Washington Avenue on the east side. It was a big new auditorium, Utah Power and Light owned there, that they had meetings and businesses in. What do we have? We had little sandwiches. We had fruit cake and ice cream punch.
Mom didn't have a real wedding dress. It was more of a aqua.
Well, she was working for Mrs. Lynch, Ann Lynch, and she was asked Ann Lynch to get her a dress. And so Ann got this dress for her, and it was aqua blue. And it was a long, beautiful dress. It didn't have a trailer behind or anything, but it was just a real nice, long, formal dress. And when the folks come from Salt Lake up to the wedding, they asked her 3 uncles to sing, and they tailored that song to fit that gown.
What song was it?
She may be something about the gown, and she may be just Melba to us, but to us she's a jewel, she's a queen, so on, and to fit that.
To Alice in the blue.
And in her Alice blue gown, yeah.
Yeah, Alice blue gown was there.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, what's yours about, Tim?
How did you first meet your in-laws?
Pardon?
Should be good.
How'd you first meet them?
Yeah, your in-laws.
Do I have to do Well, like I said to you before, I got the first ones in the family to get mixed up with that turned out to be in-laws was Lyman and Mildred. They were Mildred was Melba's cousin. Mildred Hunter and Melba were full cousins. And it was through them that we met them, and then after I started dating Melba, I went up and met the family that way. But it was through our courtship that I met them. But they didn't, we'd been going together several times before they even knew who I was.
So when did you go to their house and meet them purposely, or did you just...
Just went there to get Melba. I'd called her and made a date with her, and I went there, and that's when I met him. I always liked Melba's dad. He was a great guy. But I had my rathers about Grandma. She was a little...
Yeah, Okay.
She was rather negative towards me because I wouldn't move Melba to town.
Yeah. Did the priest ever have to go out in the grounds and check the dog from barking?
Did the what?
We're on separate sides of the couch.
Okay, we'd ask you about something I've wondered about. When you bought the Oliver tractor, the day you bought that, how'd you feel?
What, the old Oliver?
Yeah.
Well, how we happened to get, we had, Bud had bought an Oliver 77 tractor, and we'd used it, and he and I had bought a binder, and we was doing binding grain. So we decided if we was gonna do grain and be in the grain business, if we had a chance, we would buy a separator, a thrasher. So we got a hold of Oliver Equipment Company.
Blow it out.
We got a hold of Oliver Equipment Company, Mountain Implement, and they had a separator, a thrashing machine coming in, and so we bought it, and we had that little 77 tractor on it, and it just wouldn't do a job, wouldn't pull it. And I was working the railroad up at the railroad at that time, and we kept after him. We said we was going to turn that little tractor in because it was no good. It wasn't big enough to run the separator. And so Bud and I went up and we told them we was going to bring the thrasher and the tractor back if they didn't get us the tractor big enough to run the separator, run the thrasher. So I was working the railroad that time, and they said, well, we'll get you an Oliver 88. We'll get you one of those. There's some coming out now. So I was happened to be out in the yard one morning, and I saw a flat car with 3 big Oliver 88 tractors on. And I ran to the phone in the office and called Bud. And I said, there's just 3 big Oliver 88s come here, and they're billed to go through to Idaho. And Bud says, you better call Mountain States right away. So I called Mountain States, and I said, do we get our tractor today or don't we? What do you mean you get our tractor? I said, there's a flat car sitting down here. I said, I'm right here at the railroad right now. There's a flat car sitting down here with 3 big Oliver 88 tractors on. Do we get one or do you get the thrasher back? By noon that day, we had the tractor.
What year was that, Dad, that you got that tractor?
Pardon?
What year was that?
Boy, I'm not right sure. It had to be. It was before we built the new house.
So it'd be around.
It'd be around.
43.
No, it was a little later than that. 48.
Well, I remember you building the new house, and I was 2 or 3 years old, and I was born in 45. So.
In the old house.
Yeah.
So it was older than that. It was before that because we got that right after we moved into that
In the rock house.
Block house, yeah.
So it'd have been sometime around 45,
44, 45, 47, yeah. But we run that thrashing machine for like 7 or 8 years, or longer. And then the combines come out, and that put us out of business.
Yeah. You also had a corn chopper, right? That you used?
Yep, we chopped corn for a lot of people in Weber County with that old corn chopper. I rebuilt that thing a dozen times.
When people talk about the thresher crew, that you hear all the time how they always got together and ate, and the women got together and fixed the meal and all that kind of stuff. That's what Dad and his brothers did. They were the people who ran the thrasher around the country and did that. And the way the house they first lived in, that used to be a 2-story house, burnt the top story off. Mother was fixing lunch for the threshing crew.
That was before we bought our thresher.
And so there was some excitement about that, and burnt the top of the house down.
And the thrasher had just got through at our place, but Mother was hurrying up and trying to fix dinner for him, and it was about about 11:15, and they decided that they would go on down down to James F. Hunter's and do his. And they went down there, and the neighbor lady, Ruby Skeen, come running over. Melba, your house is on fire, it's burning. Well, she was trying to get dinner ready. She put some pieces of tire in the stove, in the old coal stove, to hurry the dinner up to keep the fire going. And the rubber come out and lit on the top of the roof where the chaff from the straw had blown in and started on fire. Well, somebody called down and told the thrashing crew, and boy, here they all came back to help get stuff out of the house. And I'll never forget the little lady, Mrs. Laws, that lived in the old house where Carl lived. They were living there, were renting it to them then. And she came over, and they was all getting stuff out. Joe Anderson was helping get the stove. They grabbed the stove and took it out, took everything out and threw it out on the lawn, the dinner and everything. And Joe Anderson was holding on the stove, lifting, and he lifted, pulled it to take it one hand, and another guy lifted the other end, and finally he lifted it so high that it dumped all the water out of the reservoir and went down his boots. And he went screaming out in the front lawn, threw his boots off. About that time, I was coming back in the house to get something out. Here come Mrs. Laws, and she grabbed the mattress and squoze it like this, and here she was coming out the door with that mattress, and she hit me and knocked me clear out on the lawn. She's just a little lady, and she grabbed that mattress, and here she come out the door with it. But it was really an exciting time.
Tell us about the day that Ted put the tractor in the back of the old Ford.
We was coming down the old 1800 over here past Holmes and those places, and we was coming down, some guy hollered at me and stopped to stop me. He wanted to talk to me, he wanted to get his thrashing done. And so I slowed up, and Ted was gazing somewhere, and I had stopped and figured he was watching. And he come right up and back of me and put that big front wheel to that tractor right up in the trunk, smashed the trunk right in on the car.
Ted was pulling the thrasher, which is a big piece of
big piece of equipment.
And the tractor really could just barely maneuver with it. I mean, it was so big, it was too much for the tractor really, but this tractor, I'm sure once he decided he was going to stop, with that much weight behind him, he couldn't do a thing.
And he knocked me down the road about 50 feet.
Right up in the back of that car. What about the day that Bud got his hands caught in the thrasher?
We was up here in back of Kingston's, in that old home where Favero used to live. We was up there thrashing, and Bud was there that day, and he'd got up on the top of the separator and put his hand down in to check the grain, see how it was. He used to let it run and see if it was clean and good. And he got his hand down there and he got it in the worm that augers the grain, caught his hand. Ken Farr happened to be standing halfway between the tractor and the separator, and when Ken seen that and heard Bud holler, he just took his arm and flipped it into the belt and flipped right off the tractor. Stopped the machine. Saved Bud's hand.
Yeah.
We had a lot of those crazy experiences. One day I was doing a guy's grain, and we had some Mexicans throwing the bundles in the thing, and I just happened to be standing up on the separator, and there's a big arm up there that you could pull and stop the feeder from going. And I was standing there, and this Mexican was throwing. All of a sudden, he slipped, and down in the feeder he went right on his back. He was headed right up in that feeder with his head first, and he couldn't get up. I grabbed that thing and pulled the arm, saved his butt. We had a lot of those kind of experiences.
Now, that'd been like a scene, because that thing was just pull him right in.
Oh yeah, but it chopped him into bits in seconds. Them big knives come up there, and they were about that long. And yep.
Okay.
A lot of things happened in those days.
We always lived by the ditch over there, and it seemed like we were always scared to death one of the kids was going to fall in the ditch.
Mother warned Bob and warned him about that ditch. Stay away from that ditch. Just a little fart, just big enough to, and he used to go over there and crawl on that. I had a big board across the ditch so I could go over and turn the water off and on. He'd go there and get on that thing and play. And that ditch was pretty deep for a little guy like him. So I caught him over there when Melba said, "Where's Bob?" And I went out there, and sure enough, he was over there paddling his hands in that ditch. So I went over there and I just grabbed him by the feet. 2-3 times down the water. And that ended in Bob's going over the ditch. He didn't want any more of it.
That's why that's why all of us are so stupid afraid of the water.
Huh?
That's why we're all so afraid of the water, because Mom threatened us.
Whenever Giovanni and Raj done something there's no business, out by our well we had a big pussy willow tree with big long willows on it. She'd send Bob out to get the willow, and if he didn't bring a big one, she'd use it on him too.
Tell us what happened the day that Mom was cutting up tomatoes and they exploded in her face.
That was down in the old house. Down in the old home.
Oh no, I thought it was in the cinder
block. It was in the cinder block house, I thought.
No, it was down at the old house when that happened. Grandma Priest was out there helping her, and we just got that big pressure cooker, and they was cooking them in this pressure cooker, and some.
Not in bottles. They just put the tomatoes.
No. These were in bottles, and they were pressuring them in there, and you could pressure.
How a seed got.
No. One of the bottles broke, and it plugged up this steam hole. Well, Grandma didn't. She was always getting her nose in where it shouldn't be. If she'd left Melba to take care of the thing, Melba would have noticed it and seen what happened. But Grandma took that thing off and tried to get the lid off. Well, it was plugged up and couldn't get it off. Well, Melba was quite a bit stronger than Grandma. Grandma says, "I can't get this lid loose." But Melba didn't know that the thing was plugged up, but she would have known if she'd have seen what happened. But she went over there and flipped that off, and all that hot water and tomato juice, and it just scalded her from her shoulders up. And she all of the skin peeled off her face and her shoulders. We took her in, and the doctor put a special salve on her and wrapped her, and she was wrapped, and all she had is her eyes and her mouth sticking out and her nose. But when they took it off, it peeled off perfect and never been left. The only place she had a little scar right on her shoulder. But she was lucky and never left a scar on her face. But those hot tomatoes and that juice was all over her. And that's the way Grandma was. She wouldn't mind her business. She was always doing things she had no business.
Quinn's got a question.
Says, tell about your life as the children left home, new interest, what you did with your extra time.
A little louder.
Tell about your life as the children left home, about new interests you had and what you did with your extra time.
Well, they never ever really all left home. They left one at a time, but by the time the last one was ready to leave, the first one had his kids coming, so we had kids at our house all the time. Giovanni had 3 little girls, and on Saturday he would come out and bring them out for breakfast. Sandra would go to work. Giovanni had Saturdays off. He'd come out and bring the 3 little girls out to our house and have breakfast with us. And then finally, Raj went on the mission and came back, and there was never a break that we didn't have family in our house until finally when Laurie got married. Then
She came back.
And well, that's all right. But they were always welcome back to our house, no matter what. We always enjoyed Giovanni and his little girls to come out for breakfast. Melba just loved to fix hot cakes and everything for them for breakfast. And we used to, I'll never forget them three little girls. Giovanni, Melba and I would sit on one side of the table, the three little girls on the other, and Melba and Giovanni would sit in the middle. Here was me and Melba and the three little girls and Giovanni. But we had a lot of good breakfast in that old house. But we always had kids around our house.